In the delivery room, my mother whispered, "Another mouth to feed?" My sister laughed, "Maybe this one won't end up as useless as you." I tried not to cry. Then the nurse slipped me a note that said, "Your baby was born with something they didn't expect." I'm Sienna, I grew up in Binghamton, New York. It's not the kind of town you brag about. The best thing people say is that it's 2 hours from Syracuse and 4 from New York City. I used to think small towns were supposed to come with a built-in safety net of neighbors and family. But all mine ever gave me was rot. I lived most of my teenage years dreaming of escape. My mom, Yvette, was the bitter kind of woman who made being a single parent her entire personality. She never let you forget what she gave up, especially if she never actually gave it up. She drank boxed wine in the kitchen like it was a sacrament and smoked while watching soap operas in her robe. Harper, my older sister by 3 years, stayed glued to her side like a cigarette butt. She never grew out of the house, the town, or the bullying phase she began when I was 7. Harper's always been pretty, sharp-tongued, the kind of person people pay attention to until they really get to know her. Then they leave. She never left Binghamton, though. She nested in it. Meanwhile, I tried to fly. I went to SUNY Cortland, not exactly Ivy League but far enough away. I worked retail, waited tables, and eventually took a dead-end office job in Ithaca. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Until I met Darren. He was charming. A customer turned date, a date turned boyfriend, boyfriend turned oops I am pregnant before I even had time to catch my breath. When I told him, he paused. Smiled. Said he needed to think. And then he blocked my number. That was month 2. Month 3, I lost my job, downsizing, they said. I couldn't make rent. So, ashamed and pregnant, I came crawling back to the place I swore I'd never return to. I remember walking up the path to that peeling front door. Harper opened it, looked at my stomach, and just raised one eyebrow. Jesus. You too? Mom didn't even get up from the recliner. Well, she muttered, I guess we're feeding another one now. Living back there was like being 14 again, except this time I was bloated, tired, and couldn't even drink to take the edge off. Harper made jabs like clockwork. You still waddle like a duck, she'd say, brushing past me in the hallway. Mom only spoke to criticize, how I made tea wrong, how I took up too much room, how I should have figured something out instead of coming home. I worked at a local CVS to afford prenatal vitamins and the cheapest groceries I could find. Every evening, I'd walk past the parks and pretend I lived somewhere else. I talked to my baby like he was already my friend. Sometimes, I'd sit by the river and wonder if he'd resent me one day for bringing him into this. When my water broke at 3:12 a.m., I didn't wake anyone. I called a rideshare and grabbed the bag I'd packed weeks ago. In the backseat of that old Camry, I clenched my fists and breathed through the pain. The driver didn't say a word. Just stared straight ahead. The hospital was fluorescent, freezing, and oddly quiet. A nurse named Paulina took one look at me and offered the first kindness I'd received in months. She helped me to a room and checked me in with a gentle tone that almost made me cry right there. Hours passed. Then they arrived. I hadn't told them I was in labor, but somehow Harper showed up with Mom in tow. They walked in mid-contraction, just as I was screaming into the pillow. Another mouth to feed, my mother muttered, sitting at the foot of the bed like a critic at a play. Harper snorted. Maybe this one won't end up as useless as you. The nurse caught my eye. Her jaw tightened. I turned my face to the wall and tried not to cry. It took 3 more hours, but eventually, he arrived. My son. Warm, heavy, screaming. Mine. I named him Elias. They took him for routine checks almost immediately. As the pediatrician wheeled him out, Paulina returned with a piece of paper folded in her hand. She leaned in, handed it to me discreetly, and walked out. The note said, Your baby was born with something they didn't expect. Don't worry, he's healthy. And he's special. They wouldn't explain it right, so I'm telling you this now. My pulse roared in my ears. I pressed the nurse button, but Paulina was already gone. 10 minutes later, a pediatric specialist came in and explained that Elias had a rare condition, polydactyly. An extra finger on each hand. No danger, no concern. Cosmetic. Some parents chose surgery. Others didn't. They asked what I wanted. I looked at his tiny fists, 12 fingers total, clenched like he already knew this world would be hard. I said nothing yet. When we got home, the insults shifted. Mom called him sideshow when she thought I wasn't listening. Harper joked about monkey paws. I didn't respond. I logged everything in a journal. Word for word. Date. Time. Context. Every insult, every small act of cruelty, even if it seemed petty. I wasn't sure why, yet. But I knew it mattered. I started posting anonymously on parenting forums. One mom reached out, someone from California. She also had a son with polydactyly. She said her son was 6 and brilliant, already building robots from old junk. She sent pictures. I cried when I saw his hands. They looked like Elias. That's when something in me hardened. I wouldn't raise Elias there. I wouldn't let him think he was a freak or a burden. So I began planning. Not loudly. Quietly. Strategically. I applied for a work-from-home position at a children's bookstore in Ithaca that sold personalized books. I attached samples of my writing. I waited. 2 weeks later, I got an interview. I wore lipstick for the first time in months. I did the call from the public library with Elias and his carrier beside me. I got the job. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, I saved every cent. I lied and said I was taking Elias for walks, but I was going to the library to print documents. I created a PayPal, then a GoFundMe under a fake name. People donated. Strangers cared more than my family ever had. I kept pretending at home. Smiling thinly. Cooking for them. Watching their shows. They didn't suspect anything. Not even when I took a picture of Harper's boyfriend kissing someone else in the alley behind the Crooked Pint and sent it to her from an anonymous number. Not even when I quietly got our house investigated for mold through the county health department after Elias started coughing. Not even when I recorded my mother screaming about how she should have aborted both of us and emailed it to the manager of the daycare she applied to work at. She didn't get the job. None of it felt like enough. But it was a start. I was patient. That was the key. When you're raised in a house where love is weaponized and silence is survival, you learn how to wait. You learn to make your moves in the dark while pretending to flinch in the light. They thought I was still broken. Still useless. Still the little sister, the failure, the charity case they could beat down with a glare or a sigh. I let them believe it. Elias was growing fast, wide-eyed, curious, always moving his hands in the air like he was conducting invisible orchestras. His fingers were nimble, beautiful. I couldn't imagine them any other way. I had no plans to fix him. He wasn't broken. My work at the bookstore was going well. I'd started writing product descriptions, then small newsletter blurbs, then custom stories. The owner, Madeline, was kind. Soft-spoken, early 50s, based in Ithaca but originally from Brooklyn. She reminded me of what women could be: firm, kind, intelligent, unapologetic. We'd talk sometimes after hours. One night, I told her about Elias, vaguely, about the condition, not the family. Her response was simple. Difference doesn't mean defect. It hit me harder than it should have. I began saving more aggressively. I opened a new checking account in a different bank, using my work's address for statements. I paid in cash at home, pretending I was barely scraping by. I even let Harper guilt me into buying groceries a few times. She made a show of tossing my reusable bags onto the floor when I got home. What's this? Organic? You think you're better than us now? I smiled. No. Just wanted something better for Elias. That name still soured their mouths. Around the time Elias turned 1, I started researching housing assistance in Tompkins County. Low-income programs, child care subsidies, sliding scale clinics. I mapped it out like a military op. I even contacted a local social worker anonymously, told her I was considering moving counties and needed resources. She sent me a PDF. I saved it, printed it at the library, and hid it in a box of old diapers. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes, it's paperwork and planning. And then came the birthday. Elias's first birthday. I hadn't planned a party. I knew better. But I made a small cake the night before and set it on the table with a single candle. I cleaned him up, put him in a new onesie I'd bought from a thrift store that said "Strong Like Mom," and lit the candle. Just as I was about to sing, Harper stomped into the kitchen and opened the fridge. "Where's the rest of it?" she asked. "The rest of what?" "The cake. You're not expecting us to eat that tiny thing, are you?" I glanced at Elias. He was reaching for the flickering flame, his smile wide and toothy. "I made it for him. It's his birthday." Harper rolled her eyes. "Right. The 12-fingered wonder." I froze. Something inside me snapped, but not in a screaming, plate-throwing kind of way. In a still, cold, quiet way. I picked up the cake. Blew out the candle. Held Elias close and walked back to our room. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait anymore. Within 2 weeks, I filed a rental application for a studio in downtown Ithaca. Small, yes, but clean. No cigarette smoke. No mildew. No screaming. The property manager was a kind woman named Rosemary who had a toddler of her own. She approved my application after one Zoom call and a soft laugh when Elias crawled into frame and started waving. "Tell him he's hired," she said. I gave my 2 weeks' notice at CVS, where I still worked part-time for the health benefits. I told them I was relocating. The manager, Mitchell, said, "Took you long enough." He'd seen the bruises, verbal and otherwise. You can't really hide that kind of wear. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Harper. Instead, I started packing late at night, one box at a time, hidden in garbage bags beneath my bed. I labeled nothing. Just quietly moved things out to the shed behind the house, staging them for a single trip when the day came. Elias was my shadow. He'd sit beside me, stacking plastic cups, babbling to himself. His hands worked fast, coordinated. Already better than mine. One afternoon, Harper came home earlier than expected and caught me folding his clothes into a suitcase. "What's this?" I didn't look up. "Laundry." She walked over and pulled out one of his tiny shirts. "Are you leaving?" "Someday." She laughed. "Sure you are." But she looked unsettled. A few nights later, I slipped another letter into an envelope and mailed it from the post office across town. It was addressed to the Binghamton Housing Authority. In it, I detailed the condition of our family home: mold, non-functioning plumbing, child endangerment, verbal abuse. I included photos. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. They'd investigate. Maybe find her. Maybe do nothing. But it would be one more thorn in her side. A reminder that not everyone stays quiet forever. 1 week before move-out day, my mother found the envelope from my new landlord. She stormed into my room, waving it like a smoking gun. "What the hell is this?" "My lease." She stared at me, eyes sharp, mouth twitching. "You can't just leave. Watch me." Harper was behind her now, arms crossed, smirking. "You're not gonna make it, Sienna. You can't even afford diapers without us. You don't buy diapers. You're a mess. A damn charity case with a mutant kid and delusions." My heart pounded, but I was calm. I picked up Elias, who had started to cry from the yelling, and looked her in the eye. "You can't hurt me anymore. You already did. And I survived it." My mother scoffed. "Ungrateful bitch." I turned my back on her and shut the door. It was the last time I'd ever live in that house. The day I left, I did it at 6 a.m. I'd paid a guy named Manny I met at the hardware store to help load his truck with my boxes. He didn't ask questions. Just took the cash, nodded, and worked fast. Elias was strapped in the back seat in a borrowed car seat, humming to himself. Paulina, the nurse, had sent me a card a few weeks before. She'd transferred hospitals but remembered us. The card read, "I always knew you'd get out. Some of us are just born with more fingers. Others? With more courage." I tucked it into the glove box next to the photo of Elias holding a spoon with his extra fingers. As we pulled away from that house, I didn't look back. The road out of Binghamton was cracked and familiar. The sun wasn't up yet, and mist rolled across the hills like it was trying to blanket the town in forgetfulness. I rolled the windows down a little, letting the air in, cool and damp. Elias was asleep before we hit I-81. I looked in the rearview mirror at his tiny face, so peaceful and unaware of what we were leaving behind. He didn't know that we were fleeing a legacy of bitterness, of scorn disguised as tough love, of generational rot. He didn't know that his first year was spent among people who didn't smile at him once. But I knew. And I would never let it touch him again. The move into the Ithaca studio went smoothly. Rosemary, the landlord, helped carry boxes up the single flight of stairs and even brought a stuffed bear for Elias. "You'll like it here," she said. "This building's full of people starting over." Our unit was small, just one room with a kitchenette and a narrow balcony, but it was clean and quiet. No sour wine breath in the hallway. No walls thin with contempt. I bought second-hand furniture, arranged it carefully. Every corner was chosen with Elias in mind. I turned a closet into a makeshift nursery, strung up fairy lights I'd found at a dollar store. He liked to look at them at night, giggling and waving his hands at the glow. During the day, I worked. The children's bookstore had expanded my hours. I was now handling customer communications and writing personalized storybooks. Parents would send in names, favorite animals, imaginary best friends, and I'd turn them into tales with castles and submarines and magical forests. Sometimes I'd write extras, bonus endings, side adventures, just for Elias. At night, when he was asleep, I planned. Not just how to survive, but how to rebuild. How to thrive. And how to make sure my mother and Harper would one day choke on the bitterness they tried to force-feed me. It started with a simple online post. A thread on a popular community forum called Upstate sh*Storm, a place where locals shared gossip, anonymous tips, and neighborhood dirt. I made a new account, posted under the name RenNY1975. Anyone else notice a certain daycare applicant in Binghamton got denied after a recording of her went around? Wonder what else she's hiding? The comments lit up. One person posted, "I know her. Yvette, right? She's toxic." Another, "Her daughter worked with me once. Said she called her own grandson a freak." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That post got shared, screenshot, and whispered about in digital corners of the town. By the next week, my mom's church group had stopped inviting her to Sunday brunch. She called me 6 times in a row. I didn't answer. Then I emailed screenshots of Harper's boyfriend's social media, pictures of him with a new woman, to Harper's burner account. I knew she used it. She once logged in on my laptop years ago and forgot to delete the cookies. I sent the photos with no context. She messaged me the next day, "You bitch. You did this. He left because of you." I didn't reply. I archived the message. Evidence. Maybe not for the courts, but for myself. I kept every message they sent, every voicemail where their voices cracked with rage or desperation. It felt good. Not joyful. Not gleeful. Just, like balance was starting to return. Ithaca slowly became home. Elias joined a Parent and Me class at the community center on Meadow Street. I met other mothers. One of them, Petra, invited us for weekend walks at Stewart Park. She had twins and an ex-husband who fled to Oregon when the boys turned 2. "We're all rebuilding something," she said once. "The trick is not pretending we're not." Elias thrived. He was walking now, stumbling, falling, laughing. I bought a second-hand camcorder and filmed everything. His first steps across the rug. His attempts to say truck came out sounding more like duck. His little hands, all 12 fingers, gripping blocks and crayons like tools of the trade. I started writing a new story at night. Not for the bookstore, not for clients. For me. A memoir, maybe. Or something close to it. About a girl with a mother who clipped her wings and a son who taught her how to fly again. I wasn't sure if I'd ever publish it. But it felt like a kind of release. Then, one Saturday afternoon, while Elias napped and the rain pattered against the windows, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was my mother's voice. She sounded tired. Smaller than I remembered. "Sienna, please. Harper's gone. She left town. Took everything. I don't know what I did wrong. I can't pay the rent without her. I can't do this alone. Just, call me back." I didn't. Not because I didn't care. But because I finally did. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to her. To myself. Just to mark the day. Today is the day I became whole. Not because I hurt them. But because I stopped letting them hurt me. But the revenge wasn't over. Not yet. There was still one more thing I had planned. One last nail in the rotting wood of our history. I'd started working with a local writers' collective. One of the women there, a retired social worker named June, read one of my story drafts and said, "You've got something to say. Have you ever thought of writing a piece for the Finger Lakes Review? They publish memoirs." I hadn't. But I did now. So I pulled up my journal, the one I'd started during pregnancy. All the insults. The hospital whispers. The note from Paulina. The remarks about Elias. They laughed when I told them I was applying for jobs. The birthday insult. I wrote it all. Changed the names, of course. But anyone from Binghamton who read it would know. I didn't write it for fame. I wrote it for the truth. For the women still trapped in rooms they were told were homes. For the daughters told they were burdens. For the mothers who chose love over legacy. I hit send. And then I waited. The article was published 2 weeks later. Born Unwanted, What It Means to Become a Mother After Surviving One, that was the title. I never asked them to change it. It was bold, honest, and just vague enough. But if you knew the people I was writing about, you wouldn't need to squint to see the truth. It made the front page of the Finger Lakes Review's Sunday edition. I didn't expect it to go beyond local circles. I thought it would maybe get passed around by the writers' group, shared once or twice on Facebook. I underestimated the power of truth. By Monday, it had been picked up by a regional blog. Then a national parenting page. Then a podcast. Anonymous author exposes the quiet violence of family. They asked if I'd do interviews. I declined. Let the story speak for itself. People reached out to me through the bookstore's contact form. Mothers, daughters, sons, foster parents. People who had been disowned, discarded, minimized. Some messages were just one sentence, "I thought I was the only one." But not everyone was impressed. That same week, Harper messaged me from a new number. "Did you seriously write that trash about us? Everyone knows it's about Mom. And me. Hope your dumb little story was worth burning your bridges." And then a second message, "Mom's been crying. Not that you care. She's embarrassed. People at church are talking." I read both messages while Elias sat in his booster seat, dipping his fingers into yogurt and drawing squiggles on his tray. I smiled. Because it worked. I never needed them to fall apart. I just needed the world to finally see them for what they were, and for me to finally stop seeing them as something I owed loyalty to. But revenge, real revenge, the kind that lasts, isn't about destruction. It's about disconnection. It's about building something so solid and bright for yourself that their words, their bitterness, can't reach it. And then, it's about making sure they have to watch. By spring, I'd moved to a 2-bedroom on the edge of Cayuga Lake. Sunlight poured in every morning. Elias had a real crib, a bookshelf, and a little table with paint jars that stained his fingers daily. I got invited to speak at a small community college's writing workshop. I brought Elias with me. I read excerpts from the story, answered questions, told them what it meant to give yourself permission to walk away. Paulina, yes, the nurse, emailed me after she saw the story online. She said she'd cried when she read the part about the note. "You deserved better. I'm so glad you gave that to yourself." I printed it and taped it to the inside of my new kitchen cabinet, where I keep the cereal. Every morning, I see her words while grabbing the Cheerios. Then one day, about a year after I left Binghamton, a letter arrived. Not a text. Not an email. An actual handwritten letter. It was from my mother. "Sienna, I don't know what you want me to say." I read the article. Everyone did. "You made me sound like a monster." Maybe I was. I don't know if it's too late, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Not just for what I said in the hospital, but for everything. I don't expect forgiveness. But I do hope you and Elias are happy. Mom, I sat on the porch for a long time, reading that letter again and again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't sweeping. It was scribbled in uncertain handwriting, the kind you use when you're afraid to get it wrong. I didn't cry. But I also didn't throw it away. Instead, I folded it and tucked it next to Paulina's note in the cabinet. Not because I wanted to remember her. But because I wanted to remember what survival looked like from all angles. Forgiveness? Maybe. One day. But reconciliation? No. My revenge wasn't to get them to love me. It was to prove I never needed them to begin with. And that? That was enough.